Hello, paid subscribers to Sincere American Writing. This is my second video. I wanted to discuss today an author who I'm sure many of you have heard of, and some probably have not, named Ottessa Moshfegh. She's an Iranian American writer. Her father was from Iran, her mother was from Croatia. She's my age, she's about 43. She's done, I think, about half a dozen books or so now. Um, Starting with some short story collections and about a decade or a little bit less than a decade ago I read a short story collection. I read one of her novels, and this I recently read this Lapvona, and it was a pandemic novel that she wrote in 2020 during the pandemic, and it's pretty classic Moshfegh. So I wanted to discuss it a little bit. First, before that, I've been mentioning many, many times my new essay collection that just came out, controversial, the Substack Essays Polemics 2022 to 2024. It's a collection of the cream of the crop of my essays covering politics, literature, and culture over the last 2 years. Has a great cover. I worked with a really good designer. I'm really proud of the essays. They've been worked over quite a lot and covers everything from Trump to JD Vance to the craft of writing without bias or with bias, whether it's possible to write without bias, to covering authors such as Henry Miller, Bukowski, Nabokov, uh, and many more. So I'll put a link in the post, and I really encourage you to consider buying the book and reviewing on Amazon. I really appreciate it. It's available in print. It's available on ebook. The ebook is $2.99. The print is, I believe, $14.99. So please consider that. So, okay, Lapvona. So the basic premise of the book is this 13-year-old narrator who is the son of a sheep herder father, and we don't really have a time frame, but it feels like it's, um, sort of like the 1100s or 1200s or 1300s. It's in an undisclosed town with surrounded by mountains and fields, and there's a sheep herder father who has a son who's 13 named Merrick, and the father basically hates the son. Merrick is physically deformed and a very troubled kid. We sort of like him, but we sort of don't. It's complicated, but I think we empathize with him. I empathize with him. He endures a lot of physical and verbal abuse from his father. Anyway, a man named William with a V, like William but with a V. William is essentially a king who leads the the town, and lives up in a manor in a different part of town and doesn't have to deal with sort of the run of the mill working class people, let's say, down in the village. And a huge drought comes, and William diverts the water so that a horrible um, drought and famine hit the village. But William and his guards and his people and his wife are all fine. Anyway, long story short, Merrick ends up uh, killing William's son on accident. It's a long story, and the father, Merrick's father, switches. Takes the body of the slain child, William's child, and in exchange gives up his son Merrick. So Merrick, the 13-year-old narrator, becomes William's son and lives in the manor and slowly develops an understanding over time of William's power and control and how he's diverted the water and how everyone down there is suffering. And so it's sort of just this meandering story of how that unfolds, that awareness, and what Merrick does about it. Um, it's from what I had read of Moshfegh before, it's in a similar vein in terms of the subject matter is completely different. Most of the stuff I've read by her is much more contemporary and kind of realistic, and modern, but it's similar in a couple ways. Number one, it's incredibly dark. I mean, this book, like everything from brutal rape to incest to scenes of the sheep herder father masturbating right near his son in a field with moonlight shining down to almost anything you could imagine. There's uh, and cannibalism is in there, and child abuse. Merrick, who's only 13, nurses with a wet nurse. There's a long backstory with that. There's an older woman who's like considered part witch, part medicine woman who nurses a lot of the people in town, even adults. There's a lot of um, it's highly sexualized, which is interesting, and it made me wonder more about why. Um, there's including Merrick by the middle to latter half of the story. There's almost no character, at least for me, that felt the word I would use would be likable. I didn't feel like any character was necessarily likable. Everyone is more or less some version of reprehensible, and it's very bleak. I mean, it reminded me a bit of a Cormac McCarthy novel, not in the writing style, but in the tone and the kind of mood and atmosphere and kind of feel of it. It has a sort of um, Cormac McCarthy like dark, bleak, intense, uh, like black void feeling to it. Um, what made me stick around and read the whole thing and generally really enjoy it, I'd give it, 4 out of 5 stars, is the writing itself is quite beautiful. And she's really good with, even though there is a plot, but it's not really about the plot, it's about the characters, but there's so much like sexual tension and suspense about what's going to happen next, even though we don't really know where the plot's going. And all these different characters who want different things and the different things are conflicting. She does a third person omniscient point of view. So she goes into all these different points of view and perspective, adults, children, girls, boys, men, women. And that she does that really masterfully. And she, the, some of the language is really striking. She doesn't overwrite. She's definitely influenced by people like Bukowski and Hemingway. Um, Nut Hampson, who was kind of the father of those writers, wrote a brilliant novel called Hunger from the early 20th century, which is another book I read and I'll probably talk about soon. But her writing is very spare. It's very it packs a punch. She uses words very much on purpose. When she doesn't use $50 words for no reason. Like everything's there for a specific reason. Um, and it's in the end, it's a joy to read, even if you leave the book feeling kind of depressed and kind of a little bit shocked and kind of wondering what the hell just happened. But I would say, this book came out it was published in 2022, written in 2020 during COVID. Like I said, I generally tend to read classic literature. I don't read a lot of contemporary novels. And to be totally honest, I don't read a ton of women writers. And I know I should change that. I should be reading more of them. But this book, though very unusual for our time, especially, she's a very unusual author, I would say, um, is absolutely worth reading. She's a brilliant writer, and I remember she doesn't play identity politics. I remember seeing her speak live at Pegasus Books on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley when I lived in the Bay Area. God, probably a decade ago, close to that, and maybe it was 2016 or 15. And someone asked her about a short story she'd written from the perspective of a Chinese man, and they asked the question in the sense of like, how can you like a woman who I guess can appear as white, if you want to say that, even though she's Iranian, Croatian American. Um, how do you feel that that's okay to write from that perspective? And she said basically that, you separate the art from the artist, or the point of art is to explore different perspectives and point of views, get into different minds, imagine what it's like to wear someone else's skin. It's not to stay in your lane or be safe or only write from a point of view that you directly have experienced. And I've always remembered her answer and her confidence when she answered. And I think I really respect that. And I really respect her writing. And it's not perfect. There are issues. I had some issues with some of the prose, but I always have issues with some of the prose. It's never going to be perfect. And I look forward to reading more of her work in the future. I highly recommend. She's also written, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, Eileen, McBlue, um, other books, but I recommend starting with her short stories. And then if you have the courage, try Lapvona. See you later.